If you want to get better at the SkiErg for improved performance in CrossFit, in HIROX, or other functional fitness activities, then stay tuned for this tutorial where we break out what perfect SkiErg form looks like. Let's first start by talking about the stance that you're going to have when you're working on the SkiErg. We want about a shoulder width stance, but we also want to make sure our distance away from the uprights is proper. I like to start with arms out in front, fingertips on the uprights. I like that because it gives me enough space to really hinge into the SkiErg technique, not squat. If you squat a lot, you're gonna find that your legs get incredibly fatigued and it's gonna be really hard to recover from. And so sometimes if people get positioned too close to the uprights, when they go to hinge, they're gonna feel that reduced space and they're gonna be forced into a squat pattern. So start a little bit further back so that you can actually hinge. Next, we're gonna break out the 4 phases of SkiErg form. That is the catch, the drive, follow through, and recovery. But I want you to appreciate as we go through those 4 phases, how little the cord actually moves. So if I pull the cord all the way down, you'll see that it ends an inch or 2 above the ground. But I'm only gonna engage a small percentage of that range of motion. The reason for that is our goal on the SkiErg is to hit the most powerful range of motion as frequently as we can, not to go through the largest range of motion we can with a really relatively low frequency of strokes. So our first phase is going to be the catch. And so what I mean by the catch is if my fan is going, the catch is where I first engage the cord, where I first meet the resistance of the fan. And so where you're gonna meet it is your elbows are gonna be bent at 90 degrees with your hands at about forehead level, and broken hips is gonna be the really important thing. We're not meeting the fan upright. We're started in that hinge position right there. And overall, our arm engagement during this period and through our next phase is gonna be relatively low. We really wanna think of the catch coming from the hips going back and the drive, our next phase, coming from our body weight, lats, and core, pulling on those cords really aggressively. Phase 2 of SkiErg form, the drive is where the vast majority of our power is going to actually come from. And so the drive is basically when we go from the catch, we're gonna then continue to drive our torso down, and we're really gonna drive it down to we're at about a 45-degree angle, staying in a really hinged position. So my hips stay high, a lot of hip flexion. My knees bend a little bit, but not a ton, because I don't wanna go into a squat here. I'm gonna save my legs and focus more on the hinge position. So drive that torso down aggressively to a 45-degree angle. And again, I don't wanna feel your arms work very much. So if your elbows are at 90 degrees, as you pull down, that's gonna let the majority of the upper body work come from your lats pulling down on the cord, not from your triceps. We're gonna save those for later. The triceps don't come in until phase 3. And really, I don't even like to think of this as a tricep extension because I don't want people aggressively thinking of extending their elbow or thinking that the elbow is gonna generate a ton of force into the cord. Instead, I wanna think of all of that power being generated through the drive, and then my elbows just have to follow through. And I want to have generated enough power through the drive that as my elbows extend, they're not even straining through the cord. They're just naturally flicking really, really fast through the cord. You'll hear people discuss flicking the hands to the knees. You'll hear other people talk about flicking it to the pocket. I'm gonna tell you the cue that has helped me more than anything else in this position. And it's not to think of pushing the cords down anymore. Instead, I like to think of, once I get to the end of that drive phase, I'm extending my elbows to push my body back to the upright position. So the elbows are extending and opening me up high versus pulling the cord down a little bit more. Olympic lifting is a great analogy here. So if we think about the snatch, for example, as the bar goes overhead, we don't want to think of the triceps pushing really hard to extend overhead. We want to think of the arms as just finishing and catching from the power we generated with our lower body. That's the same thing that we want to see happen with the triceps right here. You can also think of this as in this snatch, once we hit triple extension, we're not probably pulling the bar higher with our upper body. Instead, we're thinking of pulling our body under the bar by continuing to pull up. So I like to think instead of the triceps pushing down, I think the triceps are pushing my body up instead, but this is not generating a ton of force. This is the last 20% of your force output right here. Your final phase is gonna be the recovery. And that's after you flick those hands, you're gonna stand up into full triple extension. So your heels are gonna come off the ground a little bit as your knees and hips extend. You're gonna reach back upright. And as we reach back upright, we want the cords to come straight in front of the body, not taking this big, long butterfly technique that you'll see a lot of individuals do. You're gonna be faster if you move those cords back up in the straightest line possible, and that's gonna happen during your recovery phase. The final two things that I wanna discuss are going to be our damper settings and our stroke rate. So from a damper setting perspective here, what's really important here is that you choose a damper setting that allows you to really quickly pull through the core. You don't wanna feel like at any point that you're having to really strain through it a ton. And so for a lot of people, that means they're going a little bit lighter than what they actually end up usually doing. Don't feel like you're having to strain through the full range of motion. Let's also talk about stroke rate. So in general on the SkiErg, the stroke rate is gonna be in either the high 30s or the low 40s. So in the low 40s, when I'm a little bit faster on my stroke rate, that's when I'm doing more sprint style work. I'll be a little bit faster there. When I'm doing something longer or slower, that's where I'll be in the high 30s. But the stroke rate can also give you a little insight into your damper and if you have the right setting there. If your stroke rate is really low, what that might mean is you have too much resistance on here and you're having to strain a little bit too much through every single cycle. And as a result of that, your stroke rate gets a little bit lower and you're gonna generate a little bit more muscular fatigue with that setting. But the flip side, you're always really high on your stroke rate. What that could mean is that you actually need to up your damper a little bit. If it's high and you're doing a ton of strokes per minute, it's gonna be really hard for you to catch your breath. Because what you wanna really be thinking of with your breath is as you come down through the drive phase, that's when you're exhaling. If you do a forceful exhale while you're watching this video, what you'll feel is that your core engages. And we want that core to engage as we drive so that it can help with that power generation. Then we inhale on the recovery. If you're going too fast on your stroke rate, it's gonna be really hard for you to catch your breath and have that little bit of recovery that happens during the recovery phase itself. So I hope those tips help you out in dialing in better SkiErg form. If you need overall help improving your conditioning, head to performanceplusprogramming.com. Take a look at our different conditioning programs that have been proven by hundreds of athletes to help improve their conditioning for CrossFit, for HIROX, for other functional fitness activities, and I know they'll do the same for you.